Bye, hello everyone. Thanks for joining me on Learn English Through History. Find a cozy spot, take a breath, and let us begin. Imagine you are walking through a quiet English garden. The grass is soft under your feet. The air is warm and still. You see a tree, an old apple tree with wide branches. Not you sit down under it. You are not doing anything special. You are just thinking. Then from a branch above you, an apple falls. It falls straight down and lands on the ground with a soft sound. You look at the apple, you look at the tree, and you ask yourself one simple question. Why did it fall down? Why not up? Why not sideways? Why always toward the ground? This is the story of a man who asked that question. His name was Isaac Newton. He was not a soldier or a king. He was not a famous explorer. He was a thinker. A quiet man who spent his life looking at ordinary things and finding extraordinary answers. And the story of how he discovered gravity, the invisible force that holds everything in the universe together, is a story of patience, curiosity, and the power of a single question. Before we begin, if this is your first time here at Learn English Through History, welcome. This channel is a place where you can learn English through calm, true stories from history. Stories that help you understand new words and new ideas. So, take a comfortable breath. Let the story begin. The year was 1642. The place was a small village called Woolsthorpe in the English countryside. The world at that time was very different from the world we know today. There were no computers, no electric lights, no cars. People worked on farms. They looked at the sky and wondered. They asked questions, but they did not always have answers. Into this world on a cold winter day, a baby boy was born. His name was Isaac Newton. But Isaac did not arrive in the world in a strong or healthy way. I was very small. So small that the people around him were not sure he would survive. His mother later said he was tiny enough to fit inside a large hard cup. He came into the world quietly, gently, like a whisper. And yet, this small, quiet baby would one day change the way every human being understood the universe. There is something beautiful about that. The greatest minds often begin in the most unexpected ways. Isaac's father had already died before Isaac was born. So from his very first day, life was not easy for this small child. But even then, even in those first hard moments, something in him was already waiting. Something in him was already listening. And the question is, what was it that he heard? Isaac Newton grew up in a quiet home with his grandmother. When he was 3 years old, his mother left to marry another man. She moved away, and Isaac stayed behind. Not a young child, and suddenly he was without his mother. This was a painful thing. A painful thing is something that hurts you, not your body, but your heart. It left a mark on him for many years. Isaac grew up feeling lonely. Lonely means you feel alone, even when other people are near. He did not have many friends. He was not the kind of boy who played loudly or laughed in big groups. He was quiet. He liked to be alone. He liked to think. While other children ran and shouted outside, Isaac sat in corners and made small things with his hands. He built little models of windmills. A windmill is a building with large blades that turn in the wind to make power. I made paper kites. I studied how water moved and how shadows fell. was always watching, always wondering. When he went to school, he was not always the best student. In fact, for a while, his teachers did not notice anything special about him. He was quiet in class, or kept to himself. But inside his mind, something extraordinary was growing. Extraordinary means very unusual, very special. Asked questions that other people did not think to ask. I looked at ordinary things and saw something deeper inside them. Perhaps the most interesting thing about young Isaac is this. He never stopped being curious. Curious means you want to learn more. You want to know why. Even when life was hard, even when he felt alone, he kept asking, kept thinking, kept discovering. And that quiet curiosity, that gentle, patient wonder, would one day become the most powerful tool the world had ever seen. When Isaac Newton was a young man, he went to study at Cambridge University in England. Technology. Cambridge was one of the most important places for learning in the world at that time. And Isaac arrived there as a quiet, serious student, ready to listen and to learn. At Cambridge, Isaac discovered a world that felt made for him. A world of mathematics, of astronomy, of natural philosophy. Natural philosophy is what people called science in those days. He read books by great thinkers like Galileo and Descartes. I studied the stars and the movement of planets. He sat for long hours in his small room, filling pages with numbers and ideas. For the first time in his life, Isaac felt like he belonged somewhere. I had found a place where being quiet and thoughtful was not strange. Not by was valued, not by was celebrated. But then something unexpected happened. Terrible illness known as the Great Plague began to spread across England. A plague is a very serious disease that spreads quickly and makes many people sick. Cambridge University was forced to close. Students and teachers had to leave the city and go home to stay safe. Most students, this felt like a terrible interruption. Technology. An interruption is something that stops you from doing what you were doing. A pause in their education. A door suddenly closed. Not for Isaac Newton. This moment became something else entirely. I went home to Woolsthorpe, to the quiet countryside, where he had grown up. And there, far from the city, far from his professors and books, something remarkable began to unfold. Remarkable means unusual and surprising in a good way. In that stillness, in that small and simple place, Isaac began to think more deeply than he had ever thought before. And the questions he asked during those quiet months would change the course of human history forever. Isaac Newton spent almost 2 years at his home in Woolsthorpe, while the plague kept the university closed. These 2 years, from 1665 to 1667, are now known as some of the most extraordinary years in the history of science. Isaac was alone. He had no professors to guide him. He had no classmates to discuss ideas with. He had only his own mind and the world around him. In that deep, patient solitude, he made discoveries that no human being had ever made before. Solitude means being alone, but in a peaceful way. He began to study light. He used a simple glass prism. A prism is a clear block of glass with flat sides. He discovered that white light is not just one color. It is made of many colors together. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet. When light passes through a prism, it spreads apart and shows its hidden colors. This discovery surprised the world of science. But Isaac did not stop there. He also began working on a new kind of mathematics, that for understanding how things change and move. I called it the method of fluxions. Today we call it calculus. Calculus is a type of mathematics that helps scientists study motion and change. It became one of the most important tools in all of mathematics. And then, perhaps most famously, Isaac turned his attention to the sky, watched how objects moved, and thought about the moon. He thought about the planets, thought about why things fall to the ground. Slowly, carefully, patiently, he began to put together an idea so large, so clear, and so true that it had been waiting for centuries for someone brave enough to find it. And that idea had a name. It was called gravity. There is a story that almost everyone in the world has heard. It is the story of Isaac Newton and the apple. One afternoon, Isaac was sitting in the garden near his home in Woolsthorpe. The air was still, the trees were calm, and then, from a branch above him, an apple fell. It fell down, as all apples do, straight toward the ground. Most people in the world had seen apples fall. Most people had never thought deeply about it. But Isaac was not most people. He looked at that falling apple and asked a question. Why did it fall down and not up? Why not sideways? Why always toward the earth? He knew the answer was not simple. Something was pulling the apple. Not something invisible, something powerful. Invisible means you cannot see it. And if something was pulling the apple toward the earth, then maybe, just maybe, that same force was also pulling the moon, mulling the planets, holding everything in the universe together in its place. This was the beginning of his theory of gravity. A theory is an idea that explains how something works. The idea that every object in the universe pulls on every other object. That the same force that brings an apple to the ground also keeps the moon moving around the earth, and the earth moving around the sun. It was a beautiful idea, simple and enormous at the same time. Isaac spent many more years writing, calculating, and proving this idea. And when he finally shared it with the world was never the same again. But perhaps what is most important about this moment is not the discovery itself. It is the fact that Isaac was paying attention. He was listening to a simple apple, to a quiet afternoon, to the soft voice of the universe. When the plague ended, Isaac returned to Cambridge University. He was a changed man. Those quiet months at home had given him a depth of thinking that few people in the world could match. He returned not as a simple student, but as a thinker already full of revolutionary ideas. He became a professor at Cambridge at only 26 years old. This was a rare and extraordinary achievement. A professor is a teacher at a university. As a professor, Isaac continued his work. He built the first reflecting telescope. Telescope is a tool that makes distant objects look closer. A reflecting telescope uses mirrors instead of glass lenses to see the stars. This was another important step forward in science. Astronomers across Europe were amazed. An astronomer is a scientist who studies stars and planets. His reputation began to grow. Scientists and mathematicians from many countries wanted to know more about this quiet, serious man from England. But Isaac was still not ready to share all of his ideas with the world. He was cautious. Cautious means careful, not taking risks. He liked to think slowly and carefully. He did not want to publish his discoveries until he was absolutely certain. For many years, he kept his greatest work to himself, filling notebooks, making calculations, refining every detail. And then, in 1687, after years of quiet preparation, he finally published a book by technology, a book that would become one of the most important books ever written in the history of human knowledge. It was called Philosophia Naturalis Principia Mathematica, or, as it is often simply called, the Principia. Inside that book were the laws of motion and the theory of universal gravitation. Simple, clear, and true. And the world of science was changed forever. The Principia was not an easy book to read. It was written in Latin, the old language of scholars, and it was filled with complex mathematics. Complex means complicated, with many parts. But the ideas inside it were clear and powerful. Isaac Newton described 3 laws of motion. Laws of motion are rules that explain how all objects move. The first law said that an object stays still or keeps moving in a straight line unless something pushes or pulls it. The second law described how force, mass, and movement are connected. Force is a push or a pull. Mass is the amount of material in an object. The third law said that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. These 3 laws, together with the theory of gravity, explained something extraordinary. They explained almost everything that moves in the physical world. The motion of planets, the rise and fall of ocean tides. Tides are the regular rising and falling of the sea. The path of a thrown stone. The orbit of the moon. An orbit is the curved path an object takes around another object in space. For the first time in human history, the universe was not a mystery. It was a system. A beautiful, ordered, mathematical system. And one man, thinking quietly in a small room, had described it. Scientists across Europe read the Principia with amazement. Some said it was the greatest achievement of the human mind. Isaac Newton had done something that seemed impossible. He had looked at the world, asked the right questions, thought deeply and patiently, and found the hidden rules that the universe follows every single day. And the lesson in this moment is simple and important. Often, the universe does not hide its secrets from those who are not curious. It hides them from those who never stop to look. Isaac Newton always stopped to look. That made all the difference. Isaac Newton was one of the greatest minds the world has ever known. But he was also a human being. Like all human beings, he was complicated. He was not always a warm or easy person to know. I had few close friends in his life. He was serious, private, and sometimes stubborn. Stubborn means you refuse to change your mind, even when others try to persuade you. I did not enjoy arguments, but when his ideas were challenged, he could become very defensive. Defensive means you feel attacked, and you try to protect yourself. There was a long and painful disagreement between Newton and another great mathematician named Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. Both men had independently developed the same ideas about calculus. Independently means they did it separately, without knowing about the other person's work. But instead of celebrating this parallel discovery, they argued about who had done it first. The argument lasted for years, and it caused great unhappiness for both of them. In later life, Newton also spent a great deal of time studying alchemy. Alchemy was an ancient practice. Newton tried to change ordinary metals into gold. They also searched for a way to live forever. They also studied theology, the study of religion, and the nature of God. These are not the parts of his life that most history books discuss. But they remind us that even the greatest minds are searching for something more than facts and formulas. Newton was also searching for meaning, was searching for the hidden order behind all things. Perhaps this is what connected all of his work: the science, the mathematicness, the theology, alchemy, not technology. He believed deeply and sincerely that the universe had been designed with perfect intelligence. And he wanted to understand that intelligence, one question at a time. In his later years, Isaac Newton left Cambridge and moved to London. He became an important public figure. Not public figure is a person who is known by many people in society. And he was made the master of the Royal Mint. The Royal Mint was the place where England's coins were made. And he worked hard in this role and helped to fight against counterfeit money. Counterfeit money is fake money that people try to use as if it were real. He also became the president of the Royal Society. The Royal Society was one of the most respected scientific organizations in the world. He held this position for 24 years. In 1705, Queen Anne gave him the title of Sir Isaac Newton. A title is a special name given to honor someone. He was officially recognized as one of the greatest men in England. But even in these public years, Isaac remained at heart the same quiet, thoughtful man he had always been. He continued reading, writing, and thinking until the very end of his life. He never married, had no children. His life was his work, and his work was his gift to the world. Isaac Newton died in 1727. He was 84 years old. He died peacefully in his sleep. When the people of England heard the news, they mourned deeply. Mourn means to feel and show great sadness after someone dies. He was buried in Westminster Abbey. Westminster Abbey is a large, beautiful church in London where the most honored people in England are buried. At his tomb, people came to pay their respects. To pay your respects means to show honor to someone who has died. They came to honor a man who had changed the way every human being understood the world they lived in. Work did not end with his life. It continued in every science textbook, every telescope, every satellite launched into space. A satellite is a machine that orbits the Earth or another planet. Every calculation made by engineers and astronomers across the centuries. These quiet questions are still echoing today. Echo means to repeat a sound. These questions are still being heard and answered. There is a famous sentence that Isaac Newton once wrote in a letter. A giant is a very large, strong person in stories. But here, giants mean the great thinkers who came before him. This is a beautiful and humble thing to say. Humble means not proud, modest, not technology. He knew that his discoveries were built on the work of others. On Galileo, not on Kepler, on Descartes, on all the thinkers who came before him, but did not see himself as the beginning of knowledge. He saw himself as part of a long and continuing journey. That is the most important lesson from the life of Isaac Newton. Knowledge is a journey. Discovery is a journey. Learning is a journey. And every journey begins with one small, quiet, courageous act. The decision to pay attention. Look at the world around you and ask why. Isaac Newton looked at an apple falling from a tree, or he asked why. And that one question led him to understand gravity. It led him to understand motion. It led him to understand light. It led him to understand the hidden structure of the entire universe. Now, let us think about you. You are on your own journey right now. Journey is a trip from one place to another. But this journey is not a trip across a country. It is a trip through language. Every time you listen to a story in English, you take a step forward. Every time you hear a new word and feel it begin to make sense, you are building something. You are building your understanding. Not know slowly, follow them quietly, beautifully. Think about Isaac Newton sitting under that apple tree. He did not understand gravity in one moment. It took years of thinking, years of asking questions, years of being patient with himself. Learning English is the same. You do not need to understand everything today. You just need to keep going. Keep listening. Asking questions. There is a word we use for this. Not persistence. Persistence means continuing to do something even when it is difficult. Newton had persistence. He never gave up on his questions. And you can have persistence too. Every story you listen to is a small victory. Every new word you learn is a small discovery. And just like Newton, you are standing on the shoulders of giants. Every teacher who helped you, every book you read, every video you watched, every person who encouraged you, they are the giants who help you see further. So keep going. Keep listening. Keep learning. This is Learn English Through History. And this is a place made for you. A place where you can grow your English skills through calm, true stories. Stories that teach you about the world and about the words we use to describe it. If today's story about Isaac Newton moved you or taught you something new, please leave a comment below. Tell us which moment stayed with you. Was it the apple falling from the tree? Was it the quiet years at Woolsthorpe? Was it the idea that one question can change everything? And if you want to continue this journey, our next story is already waiting for you. Thank you for being here. Take good care of yourself, and we will see you in the next story. Now, as we close the story of Isaac Newton, let us hold on to one simple truth. He was not born a genius. A genius is someone with extraordinary intelligence or ability. He was born curious, was born patient, and he was born willing to ask one more question, even when everyone else had stopped asking. You have that same power inside you. The time you listen to a story in English, you are building a bridge between where you are now and where you want to be. And every new word you learn is a stone on that bridge. Some days the bridge grows quickly, the days it grows slowly, but it always grows. As long as you keep listening, keep learning, keep asking. So here is your question for today, your comment question. Think about it and share your answer below. Which part of Isaac Newton's story helped you the most? A. The moment he asked why the apple fell. B. The quiet years he spent thinking alone at Woolsthorpe. Or C. The idea that learning is a journey, not a race. Write A, B, or C in the comments. I read every single one. And before you go, remember this. You are standing on shoulders too. The shoulders of every teacher, every storyteller, every person who believed in you. And one day, someone else will stand on your shoulders. So keep going. Keep listening. Keep learning. This is Learn English Through History. Take good care of yourself, stay curious, and I will see you in the next story.